So as a background information, I have been in ministry for about 5 years now, and I am by no means a pastor or claiming to know the day-to-day challenges that they go through as a result of that position. However, speaking as a Christian and as one who has tasted a little bit of what it feels like to be in ministry, and also as a certified counselor, I believe that there are two common reasons why spiritual leaders and anyone occupying a position of leadership in seemingly unconventional career paths fall into sin. The first reason is boredom. When spiritual leaders are called into full-time ministry, in the very early years of ministry, or in the later years when they have a lot of help and assistance, they tend to have more leisure time on their hands. Boredom in itself is not a bad thing, but there is evidence suggesting a connection between boredom and an increased susceptibility to impulsive decision making and a decreased ability to exercise self-control. Research has shown that individuals experiencing boredom may be more likely to engage in risk-taking behaviors and seek out new and stimulating and pleasurable experiences as a way to alleviate their boredom. These behaviors are typically impulsive and could potentially lead to negative outcomes. A good example of this is King David in the Bible. After he had become king, he stopped going to fight wars. And as the popular story goes, on this fateful day, he had seen Bathsheba bathing naked on a rooftop, and he sent for her, and they had committed adultery. Bathsheba was married to Uriah, one of the men in David's army. And when David heard that Bathsheba was pregnant, he eventually ordered Uriah's death after plans to manipulate the situation had failed. The second reason is stress or burnout. A lot of spiritual leaders and leaders in general experience this. In the church specifically, there is a lot required of spiritual leaders, especially as the ministry begins to grow. There is a heavy demand placed on your time, on your attention, on your spiritual gifts, and you are still expected to show up every Sunday, every midweek service, and preach up a storm and live perfect lives. The pressure alone could break anyone. But to manage the demands of the job, a lot of them spend hours praying. And speaking from experience, because of the length of time they spend, it can be pretty tasking on your body. A lot of their marriages struggle as a result of the complexities of their jobs and the constraints of their time. And in order to make up for all of these, our brains, naturally wired to seek pleasure, pushes them to overcompensate for the stress with pleasure, which in most instances could be taken to the extreme. There is something known as the Yerkes-Dodson Law. It is a psychological principle that suggests that there is an optimal level of arousal and stimulation for performing tasks effectively. According to this law, too little arousal, such as boredom, or too much arousal, such as burnout or stress, can negatively impact our performance and ability to focus. In simpler terms, imagine you're trying to complete a task. If you're feeling bored, you might not have enough motivation or energy to do well. On the other hand, if you're feeling extremely stressed or overwhelmed, your performance can also suffer because you may struggle to think clearly and make decisions. So what happens when you fall in either of these categories? What do? The solution is very simple. Balance. For those that have a little too much time on your hands, take up an extra activity. Paul in the Bible was into full-time ministry, but he was also a tent maker by profession. And as for those that have no time to spare on their hands, remember that God rested from work on the seventh day as a prototype or an example of how we should behave. Remember that God came down in the cool of the evenings to commune with Adam. He didn't let his relationships suffer because of work. And lastly, remember that you are a son who is serving and not a servant. Also, God's work is never meant to feel burdensome or overwhelming. If it begins to feel that way, then it is time to take a step back and let God take over. It is time to rest, because the same people that you are serving will be the same people to persecute you when you fall In summary, God is a balanced God. And if you're watching this video, I think it's high time that we begin to extend grace to people. Spiritual leaders and leaders in general are human like us, and they are capable of falling. But if God has forgiven us our own shortcomings, then who are we to judge others, especially from a place of spite? If you enjoyed this video, then you definitely enjoy this video right here. See you there.